Dude, you look good, man. Thanks for coming.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
We spoke about this before. There's this relaxed look that you get when you leave politics. I think everybody has it.
You saw that in me? You did?
Hmm.
People have been telling me that for a couple of months now.
We'll take it.
I
Yeah.
look calm, relaxed, and maybe too relaxed. That's a problem. That might be a problem at one point. Who knows?
People don't understand the stress it takes and everything that's involved behind what we did, especially you at your level. I mean, I was just at the at a writing, but the stuff that you did, man, people don't. And, we're saying this before we started recording. Very few people understand how it is, what we do, and what it takes.
What we do is it's made you get involved because you're passionate at one point. That's why you do it. You don't count your hours.
Hmm.
You forget about your health. You forget about your friends, your spouse, and at one point, your health might go. It might all go sour, which happened to me actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think during the third year of our mandate at Premier Couillard's office, at one point I couldn't sleep. And the weird thing in politics is that when you have anxiety and stress, usually you lose weight,
Yeah.
but in politics you gain
You
weight.
gained it. Wow.
Yeah, I think I gained during my the whole political thing, which was about from 2004 to 2018. I think I gained like 35 pounds.
Yeah, I gained weight too. But like you said, it's very difficult to maintain a schedule. Not that I had one before, right?
Yeah.
It's not like I was a super athlete, but it's very difficult to get carried away.
True, and also that you get consumed by work
Yeah.
because you want to do well. And like I was saying earlier, it's a passion. It's not a job. It's not somewhere you come in and you say 9 to 5. Then
Duh.
I'll be doing other activities.
No way.
Some people in life they work to be able to do some other stuff outside of work, which is fine. Others do outside stuff, and work is just one element of their day. But when you work in politics, it's not a job; it's a commitment. So at one point, it can be 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. You're still on
Yeah.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Even during vacation time with your family, if you get a call or you see something on television, on LCN, RDI, or anything on Global, then you're going to be like, oh, that might be something that we'll be talking about. So I have to send a text now, and I'll do it now, even if I'm in supper with friends and it's 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you
Is,
do.
is that how you started? Was it always like a passion thing for you?
Not at all. I didn't want. Actually, I refused to get involved in politics for 3 years before I did.
Because I was looking at your stuff, and you studied business. So how does a guy go from business to being one of the top
Yeah.
staffers?
I actually started doing my bachelor's degree at Concordia University, majoring in marketing. I was playing football for the Stingers.
Oh,
Then
yeah.
I got a concussion, and I stopped playing. Was trying to find an activity somewhere to get involved. Got involved in student associations at Concordia for the rest of my bachelor's degree. At one point, one of my friends called me up and he said, listen, I'm doing this youth convention with the Quebec Liberals. Do you want to get involved? And I told him no. But he talked to me about this for like 2 or 3 years. And he was saying, you know what, get involved because you're in student associations at Concordia for business. You're loving it. That's what we're doing in the youth wing of the Quebec Liberal Party. So why don't you go contribute? And I was like, I don't need this. Like, why would I go? And after 3 years, I accepted to go to that youth convention and being in charge of finances, which basically means work the bar and make sure that everything balances out, and do a spreadsheet with expenses and revenues, and that was it.
This is at the youth wing.
Yeah,
Of the party.
at the youth wing in 2003, and then after that experience, I actually fell in love, with the whole political thing. And then I got involved at the party. And a year later, Yolande James, who was a staffer for then Minister of Health and Social Services, Philippe Couillard, she decided to run in the Nelligan riding in Montreal. And she was a staffer. So she was a political advisor to Philippe Couillard. And my first day in government was September 20th, 2004, when I replaced
Yolande
Yolande James as a political advisor at Mr. Couillard's office. So that was my first day. And my first day on the job was the day she was elected MNA for Nelligan.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how I started, which was completely not my objective because I studied marketing. My dream job was to work at Nike or
Yeah.
Reebok or Adidas or for the Canadians.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a brand manager.
Yeah.
And then I stayed there from 2004 to 2012, then moved on to other things, but stayed in politics. And every time I tried to leave, it never worked.
I've said that before. Also, it's like a drug, and you try to come out, and it's very difficult because the work that you do and the environment that you're involved in, it consumes so much of your energy, so much of your effort. There's things that you're working on that you won't see the result tomorrow or after tomorrow. In the back of your mind, you know that it's coming in a year or 2 years, so you're working long term. And one, not only is it difficult to replace someone that has been involved in this process for a long time, but it's difficult to find someone that will come in and just pick up from day one, right? And that you kind of you're conscious of that reality, and you're always thinking, okay, who's gonna do this if I leave?
Yeah.
Who's gonna come in? I have this pending. I have that pending. I'm working on this right now. Who's gonna explain? Like, there's so many things going on simultaneously that there's almost like a guilt that you feel bad leaving, and it just pulls you back in. I've spoken to many people in politics that had wanted to leave and they just couldn't.
Yeah.
They were just stuck, quote unquote.
Yeah. I stayed on because I was passionate about serving others.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting involved in student association at Concordia made me understood that you basically get rewarded when other people progress. You feel useful. You're trying to build projects and help others. So in that sense, I thought politics was giving me that.
Yeah.
My parents, actually, my dad was a professor for people with learning disabilities or difficulties. So he was always on. He was teaching in secondaire 5, and he had students that were, or secondaire 2 also, and he had students that were adults basically. So he was always in the mindset of helping others, get the better version of themselves. My mom was working with people with intellectual disabilities. So at a young age, I was exposed to the fact that we're all born, but we're not equal, and we need to have a level playing field so that we can develop. And after that, I got involved in different stuff like music and choir, and I traveled. And at one point, I told myself, you know what, maybe the student association was one way to get involved. But wow, by getting involved in politics, being just a staffer or even a person with a QLP card, that I could actually propose ideas that might work for others. So that's why I was doing this.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was never involved in politics either. I studied politics, but just because I liked it and I enjoyed it. But I was conscious while I was studying that there was no way in hell that I would do anything related to politics when I came out of university.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a stressful moment for me, because I was thinking, okay, what's next now? Okay, I'm finishing university. What do we do? I fell into politics. It was a stroke of luck, basically, that brought me into politics. But I realized once I was in politics that there was this whole other world, and I was so impressed to see that we had an enormous group of youngsters that were involved, and like you said, were interested in proposing ideas, and just intelligent kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. I missed out on that completely.
Yeah.
I had no idea that even existed.
Yeah. The difficulty we have today in 2019 is that at the time I got involved, I felt that kids my age were idealists and we wanted to change the world.
Yeah.
Now, I guess cynicism is really high, so it's kind of tough to bring people in and make them, feel like they're contributing for real.
Yeah.
That's the
Politics has gotten a bad rap.
True. And then, then the media doesn't help, obviously, sometimes. And politicians, they don't help themselves. And then when you're a staffer or you're somebody that wants to get involved, you're not listening. Because you know what? Before it was focused on, I'm a liberal or I'm a PQ or I'm a ADQ or a CAC or I'm a separatist or I'm not. And today people are more interested in causes like the environment,
Yeah.
healthcare, immigration,
Well, that's
economic
changed, yeah,
development.
and it's changed completely the political landscape.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
then you can get in. You don't have to get involved in a political party
no,
to
it's a
have an
cause.
impact on the world.
Yeah.
So why do it? So that's the question that different parties have to ask themselves. Like, what are we doing to get good ideas from people who are interested or invested in different types of causes, and how do we make them stay instead of going somewhere else to
Yeah.
fulfill that?
Well, that was my question I was going to ask you. I mean, there's a question of loyalty afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a wave of supporters. Are they here because they believe in our ideology, they believe in the party, they believe in what we're proposing, or are they just here because we have one or two or three popular ideas that they just want to get behind?
There's different reasons to get involved. I got involved in the Quebec Liberal Party because I admired Jean Charest as a politician. I admired.
I second that.
I admired Lucien Bouchard. I admired Robert Bourassa. Yeah, I was telling you earlier, I was in a choir. I was 14 years old, but I actually sang at the funeral of Robert Bourassa.
No way.
Yeah, and at the time I was 14, and 14 or 15. I do not remember. I actually didn't know who he was. I
Yeah.
wasn't interested in politics at all. So these people were really impressive to me.
Yeah.
And I got involved in 2003 at the beginning, but 2001 I saw the terror attacks. I saw the reaction of the world, and I got interested in that stuff. So that's why I started to get involved. But people, they're getting involved because they're inspired by something. Either it's the leader, it might be the fact that they see inequality in their own life, and that they just want to get involved somewhere to make that change. Or their friends are going to bring them to one activity, two or three, and then at one point you're going to get involved, and you're there. So the reasons are different.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the objective that you have, which is to change the world, that's common to everyone.
No, for sure. I mean, look, the way I see it is that as long as you're involved, it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
But what changes now, and it's what you were saying before, it's very confusing, especially for parties. For example, the Liberal Party now, they're in this whole restructuring phase, and it's complicated. It's complicated because they don't know who's behind them, who to go get, why should they get them, and like everything has been completely changed in the political landscape in Quebec.
Same thing for the PQ.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah.
I think all parties are experiencing that, except obviously for the ones that that saw this growth pattern and just pretty much because it was a wave of support, right?
Yeah, you're right. But you know what? The growth doesn't mean that you don't have to ask yourself questions
No.
so that you're to find your own identity.
Mhm.
Because I don't think that the last election was about the CAC being the best thing that ever happened to Quebec. I think the last election was about some bad choices or decisions made by the government. Some of it that had to do with the fact that the Liberals were there for 15 years. Another fact that the CAC became an alternative instead of the PQ, which was really weird at one point. The fact that the PQ decided to take their separatist agenda and put it aside, so they lost a lot of votes. And, there was a couple of things that made that happen. But if you ask today Quebecers, they'll probably say they're satisfied with the government. That's what the polls show. But at the same time, if you ask them what is the DNA of the CAC, I don't think they know.
Nobody knows.
I'm going to say they're nationalists, but what does that mean? What does that mean, being nationalist? Like, what exactly does it mean? Language? Does it mean restricting individual liberties for others so that we can assert ourselves in the world? What does it mean exactly? I'm not too sure about that. So they still have to define themselves, and Québec solidaire, they have to define themselves as a credible alternative to a CAC government, and they can stay to the left, but they need to have economic credibility, and they have to build something. So everybody's got something to work on.
But see, look, I agree with you with the CAC, and I think one of the smartest things that Legault did was to announce that they weren't a separatist party.
Yeah.
He came out, and I think from that point, that was the turning point of the party, because that was the confusion. I remember even back in 2014,
We use that.
we used it, we milked it, and it was real confusion, and we paired that with back then, the whole charter of values that the PQ wanted to propose. So it was kind of like a package deal. The PQ, CAC, same thing. And he saw that, and they changed. And I think that for that at that moment, everything kind of shifted for them. The 15 years is obviously one thing that comes up a lot, but the Quebec Solidaire, I find it mysterious, because yes, they're in the left. I think they're in the radical left. But that whole economic credibility, which I think is the most important one, I feel like their supporters don't really care about that. They don't care. It's more the ideology. It's the movement. It's they're getting the ground support of just people that want to create a change and provoke a movement, right? So they won the elections based on the environment.
You're right. But that's the reason why they have to work on their DNA, because if you want to be a governing party, you need to appeal to more people. Obviously, you have to keep your values. That your political action is based on values. So for Québec Solidaire, they have to stay on the left. I mean, in France, you have Jean-Luc Mélenchon, you have les Socialistes, you have different parties that are on the left. Being on the left is not that bad. I mean, it's not bad. It's a valid way to see the world. But if you cannot back it up with common sense, concrete economic backing, and consider what people think, so that they don't believe that you're only based on ideology, then the more you get credible, the better it is for them. And the real thing is that in Quebec, it's true. I mean, we've been separated by federalism and the separatists, and it's only been that. When you talk to the United States and you look at the Republican Party, I don't know what they're proposing, but I know their philosophy. And the Democrats, same thing. If you look at Les Républicains, which is more on the right side in France, or le Mouvement de Marine Le Pen, it's also on the right. The Socialists also. I don't know what they're all proposing, but I know where they stand. In Quebec, since we were always based on federalists and separatists, who's who? Québec Solidaire, they're on the left, that I know. The CAQ, I'm not too sure. The Liberals, they're more center, sometimes center left, sometimes center right. So it's not, the political landscape is not clear in Quebec at all.
No.
At the federal level it is, but not here. And you were mentioning earlier about the CAQ, with their federalist approach. You know what? I've been, because in my old job with Premier Couillard, my job was to be the link between Quebec and the federal government. So the Prime Minister Trudeau's office, and also with different premiers' offices all around the country. And since Premier Legault got in, they think he's a good guy, but they don't think that he's actually working to make our federation better. Trump was saying America first, right? I think Legault has this mentality where he goes Quebec first, which is good for me in a sense, but it cannot be Quebec first and Quebec alone.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, his predecessor, Mr. Couillard, had a vision where we were saying we need to make Quebec better, but we need to make that country better also, and it's important as well. So I don't see right now a desire from that government to be an actor of change in the federation and to make it better. So if they sold to Quebecers that no referendum, Quebec is strong within Canada, that's fine. But the next step is to see if they're going to contribute so that the country can advance in the right way. And that remains to be seen.
Well, look, they're still a new party, right?
True.
But one thing's for sure is that, like you said, politics was always very polarized in Quebec between federalists and separatists. And that's why I think he was very intelligent of occupying that space of the true alternative, which is why he passed. And I think that's where Mario Dumont probably failed back in the 90s, because he aligned himself with the separatist movement. I think had he not gone with them in 95, perhaps the CAQ wouldn't even exist. I think the ADQ would have grown and occupied that space. It's going to be interesting to see how things evolve.
My first election in 1998 that I had the eligibility to vote, I voted ADQ.
Yeah.
I did not even vote Liberal. So because I felt he was young. I liked the whole idea of you know. Of having a strong Quebec within Canada, of asking for, demanding, certain powers, and just being a collaborative type of partner for other provinces. So obviously, I mean, the CAC government has been there since October. Um, Obviously, I did not vote for them. I'm liberal, but Quebec liberal. But I figure, we got to give him a chance. I mean, um, if they're doing well and Quebec's doing well, we're all doing well. So, what's the objective of being involved in politics? That gets back to the first question we were talking about. I mean, I'm not there personally. I'm not involved. I wasn't involved in politics only to win. I was involved in politics to make Quebec better. So if another party is there and are proposing stuff that makes our lives easier, well, fine.
Yeah.
That's the way life works.
I agree with you. And, a lot of my friends came up to me and told me, after the election, oh my God, what's going to happen? Is it the end? And, for me, the comparison is, I bring it back to 2013 when we lost to the PQ. And the difference between now and 2014 is that automatically you saw that there was an instability because of what they were proposing, because of the fact that they're a separatist group, a party, foreign investors kind of held themselves back. Things kind of slowed down, and we got to, at the end of the day, we have to admit that that 18-month period that they were in power. I mean, you can't really do that much damage, but we did see a significant drop in investments and in economic growth. And for me, at the end, and that's where I compare it to today, where this new party has taken over, and I'm thinking, are they? Is there a negative point here? Is there any instability anywhere in the horizon? And I
Mhm.
don't think so. So on that, from that point of view, like you said, give them a chance. I mean, I don't think they're going to repulse the investors. I don't think the economy is going to slow down. I think we were very diligent enough in the last 4 years to take care of the economy, and we saw with the recent budget that came out. Even they admit the fact that the numbers are so good that we're thankful that we're able now to uh, to have the budget that they tabled. And I don't think it's going to be that tragic or as tragic as people think.
Well, I was talking to some different friends and also in the media, and I was saying that it was the easiest budget
Oh my God.
that the government had to make in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years. Honestly, 'cause when you think about it, and but with that comes an added pressure for them to make the right decisions, but more importantly, to come up with results.
Hmm.
Because I mean, the when Lucien Bouchard came in 19 after the referendum, he became the leader of the PQ. Um, there was a big deficit. I mean, the finances were terrible. He won the election in '98, and they called that the deficit zero, which was really hard. But at the end of the day, I mean, he did the job. He did the job. He did it. He did it well. So at starting from that point and all the way to Monsieur Couillard, who did the same thing. I mean, these people that go right after it, Bernard Landry, in 2003, when the election came along, he was saying I don't know if you saw the movie À Hauteur d'Homme, but he was saying, listen, the finances are going well, the economy is going well, jobs are going well, so we're going to, bring down income taxes, or we're going to give relief to the middle class. That's what we're going to do. And that was his old plan, but he still lost, right?
Hmm.
So the fact that Monsieur Legault has all the cards now, it's an added pressure because in 4 years, people are gonna say, "Listen, you had the best scenario, so what exactly did you do?
Hmm.
And what are the results? How is my life better now? Do we have an economic crisis that's on the horizon? Who knows? I don't know. I think they have a competent team. I just don't know if, like every government, like I don't know if at the end of 4 years he'll be able to say that everything was done the way he wanted to, and all his promises were, that he did what he promised us to do, right? So it's easy to make that budget, but it's tough because the expectations, they're really high now.
The expectations are definitely high, and I was following yesterday all the analysis. Um, the guy really came on and flexed his muscle and said, "Look, this is what we're going." And of course, like you said, he had the leeway to do it because of what he had inherited as an economy. the fear that a lot of people are expressing is that you went so much so fast that in the following years, are you going to be able to sustain that? Right. Um, that's the big question mark.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, there's an increase in government spending, which is quote unquote a good thing. But the following year, I think they're back to 3-4%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lack over there.
Yeah,
Who's
that's a problem that every government has. I mean, at the end of the day, if you decide to raise different type of spending, are you going to be able to finance it the years after? And then if a new government comes along, and do you have to cut off something, like where are you going to take the money from? Like that's the question that always comes up. But you know what, that I think they're trying to have a clear distinction between their predecessors and themselves, obviously, specifically on themes that are really important to him, like education, healthcare, and the elders. And they talked a little bit about the economy, which were a couple of things that are good, by the way, but they really talked about the people, because what we heard in the last election also was, you guys did really well with numbers, and we thank you for that. But for the people,
you lost the base.
for the people, what's the benefit here, right? I think there were benefits, but were we? What was the previous government really? Were we really good to tell people that actually things were going well for them? I don't know. Did the people feel that it was going well all the time? I don't know. Obviously, they might have felt that it was not going that well because,
Well, the message
we
was
got
clear.
kicked out.
Yeah, the
right?
message was clear. But you were there. I mean, you were at the PMO. What was the sentiment over there going into the election?
Well, going into the election, one of the things that we had in mind was, in 2014 we came up with a plan, and we made commitments. And one of the things that was really that really was really important to us was that, a lot of times when new governments come in, they always say that the financial structure of the province does not allow them to respect the commitments that they've taken.
Standard. It's a standard spiel.
They
Yeah.
always say that. But Mr. Couillard at the time was like, you know what? I'm going to go with different commitments, and I'm going to make sure that in 4 years, when the new election is going to come up, that we're going to have a clear understanding of what's the status of our financial framework in Quebec, so that people can understand where we're at. So the feeling was that, well, we took commitments, we fulfilled the commitments. The whole thing with the budget and what some people call austerity and stuff, it wasn't a choice that we wanted to make. It was a choice that we had to make.
Yeah.
And I remember Mr. Couillard, he got elected in April 2014. I remember him being on the phone in May 2014, talking to credit agencies in New York and telling them, you know what, we're going to fix this. And people were ready to basically write us off, with the credit rating. So, and we already had lost a little bit in the credit rating the year before. So it was an obligation for us to do that.
Yeah.
And I remember in September 2014, we went to New York to the Climate Week conference, and we went to Bloomberg and had an editorial board there, and we were talking to these folks, and they were showing us that Quebec was, well, structurally in deficit, with debt and all that stuff. And Premier Couillard said, you know what, I'm going to fix this. And they told him, they said politically it won't be good for you. But the thing I admired about Premier Couillard was that the fact that he wasn't a politician there to be reelected all the time. Like he basically wanted to do the best thing that he felt that he had to do for the province, so that in the short term, medium, and long term, that we would all be fine.
Yeah.
And he was ready to stay on principles instead of going for, well, the polls say that I should not be doing this, or since I want to get elected, re-elected, and that's the number one priority that I have. Well, I'll listen to the polls and I'll listen to XYZ. So I mean, it was tough.
Mm-hmm.
But in the following years, in 2015 and 16, we went back to Bloomberg.
Mm-hmm.
And the first year the province was in surplus. The Bloomberg folks told Philippe Couillard, congratulations, because we saw you came here in 2014. You told us that you had to do something that was difficult, and you told us you were going to do it. And when they saw him in 2016, they were like, okay, congratulations. We didn't believe that you were able to do that. So that was the type of premier that Philippe Couillard was. A guy that was on principle, a guy that wanted to respect his what he said. He's an honest guy, and a guy that wanted to fix the structure, the financial structure of the province, and fix the economy, because his thinking was, if the economy goes well, we can finance everything. You can be as generous as you want with everybody, but if you don't have the money to back it, or a plan or credible plan, well, it's
going
nothing.
nowhere. Yeah.
You're going nowhere. So that's the way he saw it.
Nah, that's amazing. See, these are the stories that I want to share with people, because many people listening, they don't understand what's going on backstage, right? They
Yeah.
don't understand the work that's involved. They don't understand the sacrifices. They don't understand how people think, how a certain decision came about, and it's amazing to hear that. Even for me, I mean, I knew he went to New York to the climate
Yeah.
week. I didn't know there was
Yeah.
that kind of stuff happening in these sort of conversations. Look, this is how I've always felt about Mr. Couillard, because I got to know him in 2007. That's when I started, and he was the health minister at that time. And I saw him as a man who was very like cerebral, right? He was a very concentrated man, socially a little bit awkward. I have to admit, but he always struck me as a man who we're at point A, we need to get to point B. How do we do it? That very, very mechanical in the way he thinks and the way that he proceeded in doing his business. And I don't think there's ever been a health minister that has been in that position for as long as he had. He was untouchable. Of course, he knew the health system better than anyone else, and which is why we support him. I mean, we were one of his earlier supporters in his leadership race, and you were there, of course, as well.
Yeah.
And everybody, I remember meeting people and leaders in the community that were saying, "Look, he's the wrong guy. He's the wrong guy." And I remember a lot of people telling us, "You got to back Moreau, who's an amazing politician, very different style." But he was very convincing, and it's what you're saying. And I'm just going back to how we felt when we were supporting him. He was very convincing in his approach and in his strategy and the things that he wanted to move forward. And it was very difficult after you met him to not be on the same page. It was very difficult.
I understand that feeling. The good thing about at that time in the Quebec Liberal Party was that we had a lot of talent. We still do today. We had a lot of talent. So Monsieur Moreau was a great candidate. Great candidate. Monsieur Bachand also. There were other people that were thinking about running, which they didn't at one point. But there was a lot of talent there. But you know what? The thing is, it's a weird thing in politics because, as individuals, we want people that are straight, that have principles, values, and that tell us the things as they are, right? But when you're an opposite, when you're the adversary, your job, one of your jobs, is to define that person. So you were saying that some people thought that Mr. Couillard might have been cold or distant or something like that. I know him personally, and he's not like that.
No, I know.
I know that the public persona might have seen like that. I recognize that, but when his adversaries politically taxed him of being cold, distant, he's not listening to anyone. He only thinks that he's right. So that's basically a positioning where you're trying to take one of his best qualities and turn it into something negative.
Yeah.
And his adversaries politically, honestly, they did a great job of doing that. Because I saw this man I was telling you about the Bloomberg. I remember also during the different negotiations concerning the new NAFTA deal, We went to Washington, and he met with two secretaries of President Trump, which were Wilbur Ross, Secretary of Commerce, and also Sonny Perdue, Secretary of Agriculture. And during those meetings, it's crazy because the Monsieur Couillard he's a neurosurgeon, right? So he's a smart guy. Everybody knows that, understands that. But maybe in a in a rally, a partisan rally, you don't see that as something that's always inspiring, let's say in a speech. But I can tell you that in those meetings, when you have a premier that is interested in every subject, that is quick and smart and understand things and can make relations with different things, it makes up for some meetings that are pretty passionate. I can tell you that. And I heard him defend our dairy producers in a way that I haven't heard him or anybody else before that.
Yeah.
And he was talking to a Secretary of Agriculture who is a respected man, who lived, I believe, in Indiana, if I recall, and he was governor, I believe, and this guy came from the rural place, knew everything about that subject. And in front of him, he had someone that actually understood everything also. So that was, those are moments that are backstage and that you don't see in the media, that we can't really talk about it while it's happening, but that's not the point. But I saw him do stuff that, honestly, I was kind of surprised. Another example for you is that in last June, President Macron came to Quebec and to Montreal, and we had a meeting. We had met with President Macron before, but President Macron was going to the G7 summit, and they were talking about the aluminum crisis and what's happening with the tariffs and stuff. And without going into the details of that conversation, because that's pretty confidential, but Monsieur Couillard suggested something to President Macron for the G7 summit. And I saw him take a pen, write it down, and say, Philippe, it's a pretty good idea. I didn't think about that one. And so those are the types of relationships he was building in terms of credibility towards others. And I saw that with Al Gore. I saw that with the president of Senegal, with the FME, with the OECD. So he was well respected. And that's where I got interested in international relations and, the image of Quebec and how are we understood outside of our own bubble, and why Canada or our relationships with other provinces and how it's important. That's why I was mentioning earlier the whole thing about Quebec has to be Quebec first, but it has to be a credible partner to make the federation work. And that's where we have to focus on right now.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you changed and you went to take over the international relations department at the PMO, and I was going to ask about that because you're a guy that's always done communications. You've worked in many departments since 2004, either in as a communications advisor or even as a chief of staff or deputy chief of staff. So you have ample experience, and I always felt that you placed your bet in the right candidate going into the leadership. Ended up becoming premier. Was the plan for you always to do communications, or did you aspire maybe to be chief of staff or deputy chief of staff? And how did that transition happen? I mean, how do you take all that experience in communications and in the management and going into international? Like, what was the link? I know that you just said that you were interested in international relations.
Well, I wasn't at the beginning. I was. I worked as a press secretary for different ministers, as you mentioned, and during the leadership campaign, I was doing media.
Yeah.
During the election campaign of 2014, I remember being on the bus with the premier, the then, I guess, leader of the opposition, and being on the bus with him maybe 2 or 3 days before the election date, and he talked to me and he said, "Listen, I see the polls. We might win. Never sure, but I just want to tell you that if you're interested, I would like for you to work with me at the Premier's office if we win, and be my spokesperson and director of communications if you're interested." And I remember telling myself, I'll never be able to do that job. That was my first thing. And I told him.
But you had done that previously.
Yeah, but it's not the same thing. in my head,
Because
being
you're
at
at
the
the
premier's
yeah.
office, it's not the same thing. It's a
Yeah.
big thing. When I started in 2014, I was looking at the director of communications of Premier Charest, and I was like, "This is the smartest guy on earth."
Yeah, I remember
and
him.
and you know, that Hugo D'Amour, his name was, and I was like, "Wow, I would love to be like him," but I never thought that that opportunity would come, and so I switched to international relations because during the span of total in 4 years, I think we went outside of Canada about 47 to 50 times.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, we went to China twice, to Cuba, to Israel, to Senegal, to France, to Germany, uh, London. Well, London, I mean, Great Britain, to the States. There's a lot of places that we went to, and Switzerland. And when I saw that, the interesting thing was that at the premier's office, you have to understand that the premier is there. There's a chief of staff, and there are different advisors that work on different files. So you have one that they work on health, the other one on the environment, the other one the economy. And what I thought was interesting about international relations is that it's not a vertical type of subject, it's horizontal. So I could go, we went to China in January 2018, and it was fun because we had brought a business delegation of 200 businesses, and they were in different sectors. They were in winter sports, construction, green construction. Like it was literally like different types of businesses. And at the same time, the next day, we would be signing a deal with the Chinese government on culture. You know. At, that was weird. At La Cité Interdite with the Minister of Culture of China. So I would talk about business, then talk about culture, then talk about IT, then talk about intelligence, artificial intelligence, and then so that was crazy. So I could talk about anything. So I was like, you know what? Instead of doing communications and following the premier everywhere, when I mean everywhere, it's in Quebec, Montreal, that is going to Gaspésie and coming back. I mean, I have a personal life also. So I figured, what's really interesting to me is really the international stuff. It's horizontal. And the G7 was coming up the year after. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to just concentrate myself on Canadian relations, international relations, and this would allow me to talk about every subject. So I'll still be stimulated in that sense, and I'll be able maybe to work out some stuff. In June 2018, the Premier Couillard and President Macron signed a joint declaration on Quebec, France, on artificial intelligence. But as a director of international relations, not in communications, my job was to work with the Élysée to come up with that declaration. And we worked together. We had different discussions. And at the end of the day, I saw them sign the thing and announce it. And it's collaboration that's going to last for, the couple of years there. It's good for businesses. It's good for our researchers. It's good for Montreal, for Quebec as a whole. So those are the types of concrete, topics where I could make a difference. And coming back to what we were saying, the same thing the same reason why you got involved. It was to change the world, right? So in my head, I was contributing so that others could change the world with AI internationally and partnering up with friends.
I was gonna ask you while you were saying that. I was thinking about, how does all these things get prepared? Like, see, you went to China with 200 businessmen. How does this work? Who's behind all this? Who's putting all this together? Is that like someone like you, or is it just people over there that organize and you just participate? I mean, this is what's interesting to me. How does all this come together?
It's a huge project, and there's a lot of people who work on it, and the people from the that work for the government, which are civil workers. From the Ministry of International Relations to the Ministry of Economic Development. These folks are competent. La fonction publique, they call it in
Civil
French.
service, yeah.
They're smart, they're committed, they're competent. And so on the business side, the Ministry of the Economy has a section that is called Export Québec, exports. So they were recruiting different types of businesses. They have advisors that go to China with these folks, and they build an agenda for them, which is composed of B2B meetings, cocktails, personal meetings with businesses. So that's one part. The second part is that Quebec has an international presence all around the world, and there's three or offices in China, and there's a person that is in charge of all offices in China for Quebec. So that person is there all the time, and they basically make contacts diplomatically and on different areas. So these people were working also on what the premier was going to do. And at our office, we had a team of people in charge of I would say the operations, or the functioning of that whole thing. And we had a couple of people there, and they were headed by Brigitte Fortin, who is a competent, smart woman. And so she was working with those ministries, working with the people in China, and I was working in my things also with those ministries and stuff. So, and we built in a span of 2 or 3 months an agenda and activities, and we all went there, and every day from morning to night we had something to do. And it's 12-hour, 15-hour days. You sleep maybe 3 or 4, but the adrenaline is flowing. So you stand up, and every time you wake up in another country and you're representing Quebec, there's something that
There's
is
a sense of pride too, right?
There is a sense of pride, and you're also responsible, or you're kind of thinking, well, you know what, I'm gonna stand up, I'm gonna be straight, I'm gonna be as pleasant as possible, I'm gonna try to be polite, competent, and because we're representing the people at home, although I'm just a staffer, but I felt that I had a responsibility to help the Quebec's reputation internationally to be as good as it can be. I felt that that was my responsibility. Although I'm not an elected official. I mean, I'm not a personality. I'm not.
But But see, this is the thing, right? The politicians are usually the person front stage, right?
True.
There's such a huge machine in the back that nobody understands. See, like everything that you're saying right now, there's a lot of people that don't understand that Quebec has this presence worldwide. That they have all this machine working on getting Quebec exposed, creating business and economic relationships, education, culture, whatever you want. That Quebec has different delegations all over the world that are working hard at creating these opportunities. There's just so much happening, and everyone just sees the front man, and it's our job to make that front man look the best possible.
Yeah.
And there's just so much that goes into it.
Well, I always felt, I told that to Premier Couillard at the time, I always felt that my job was to be an extension of him to the people outside our office. That's what I was trying to do. And that's with the civil service, it was the relationship with the civil service. It was outside with other, the people, staffers of governors in the U.S. or the Élysée people, or that's what I was trying to do. And I mean, the elected official is important, and it's that people focus on him or her specifically, but that person cannot do anything without a surrounding cast that will not only work tons of hours, but really understand his psychology, how he works, what he likes or not.
It's a unit,
how
right?
he thinks, and your job is basically to think about ahead of him of things he's going to come up with. And that way you can serve him well, because your job is to serve the premier, right? And in your head, you're not, I mean, I've never been partisan that much. And in my head, I wasn't serving Philippe, because I appreciate Philippe Couillard. I was serving the institution, which is the Premier of Quebec. And the Premier of Quebec represents all of us, those who voted Liberal at that time, those who didn't. And in my head, it was a privilege.
For sure, because look, there's partisanship, but then once you get in, there's an obligation. to serve everyone, right? And you kind of put your colors aside, and you're there to do the job,
Yeah.
and it's a huge job.
But it's tough to
Premier
put the
League.
color aside. I don't know how you did, but it's tough sometimes. But
Like you, I
but
was
you,
never a big partisan either.
yeah,
I mean, for us working more locally, I was just at a writing level, but our mentality is much different. I mean, the same way that you guys were working on the missions and working on the different projects. Day one after the elections, we were working on winning the next election.
yeah,
You understand?
yeah,
So yeah, it was difficult because as you're thinking about that strategically, right? Okay, well, how can we look at the numbers? Where did we do bad? How can we do better? Who can we work with? You're still obliged to serve the people that don't vote for you,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there's that kind of meshing that happens, but there's still the work happening in the background. And it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort, like you said before. It's a huge sacrifice. It takes a toll on the family, on the friendships. I mean,
And the thing is that you get affected personally. That's I don't know for you, but one of the most difficult thing being backstage for me was the fact that some reporters or journalists they were telling me that, and sometimes I was kind of impatient when I was in communications because I was frustrated about the title of the article and the way they were bringing it, but I took it really personally.
yeah,
And at one point when they were attacking Monsieur Couillard, it's like they were attacking me. Like instead of saying this is my job, and I was telling earlier it's not a job, it's a commitment.
yeah.
So to distance yourself from the personality of the person of the your boss, let's say, it's tough.
Of course it
It's
is.
really tough.
Well, because you're involved with that person
Yeah.
almost. Well, I don't want to say 24 hours, but
Yeah.
not far from that.
Yeah.
Like you said,
How did you manage that? Like I thought it was tough.
look, we went through our own storm, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy, and of course it affects you. I don't know how we did it. Honestly, I don't know how I did it.
You're just trying to survive these things, but it's kind of sometimes you have to separate yourself and just have the worker and then the person
But
and divide it.
but that's the other thing about politics that I noticed is that very quickly you develop a hard shell, and you learn that whatever negative comes has to bounce off you. If you take that in, it's gonna drag you down, and in no time you're gonna look horrible. You're gonna look miserable.
Well, you know what? I failed at that.
You did?
I literally failed at that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
Because the thick skin is what you said. It's being able to understand that it's going to bounce back. But that's one thing I learned from the backstage is that I cannot take it personally. When somebody's attacking our government or my boss or on a personal level, they're not attacking me, and I have to be level-headed about it.
look, I wasn't exposed as you were to that much media attention. But I don't know. I mean, I think from a young age I developed this ability to just ignore,
Yeah, yeah, I'm not that.
ignore my parents, ignore my siblings, just ignore everything that I didn't want.
I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't like that. No, I was the opposite.
But it's tough. And like you said, because there's so much effort put into everything that you do in politics, the minute that there's something that comes against what you're doing or against what you're thinking, of course it affects you.
But you know what? I didn't. When someone does something wrong in the government or anywhere, in that sphere, I mean, I don't care if they get trash really, because sometimes they deserve it.
Yeah.
They're really like sometimes they do. Sometimes decisions are made that are terrible, and the empathy is not there, and the strategically is terrible, and when a person says it's bad. So I was never mad at that. I was mad when, in my view,
You did the
they
good
were
thing.
they were well, yeah,
bashed
or
you.
they
Yeah.
were attacking character,
Yeah.
personally, either the opposition, or anybody else. Like when I felt that it was unjust and I knew that person was genuine and sincere and everything, that would piss me off. It would. And that's when I got, kind of difficult. And instead of having a hard shell, like you were saying, where it would bounce off, I would become cold
Oh yeah.
with these people. Like completely cold. Because that was my way of fighting it because I told myself, if I get emotional here, I might say something I'm going to regret. And I was mentioning earlier, in my head, I'm an extension of my boss. So I cannot be unpleasant.
You got to measure up.
Yeah. So the best thing I can do is basically be cold or maybe ignore or not talk. But that seemed like I was really pissed anyway.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you ignore people, it shows others that you're pissed off. So it's not that great.
Well, see, this is the thing about the media. I mean, forget about the opposition. The opposition has a job to do. So they're going to use whatever they have to portray you in any way they think that it's going to bring you down. But the media just wants to create a reaction, right? So, and I felt very often that, look, why aren't you reporting the story? Okay, look, this is what happened. This is where we were. This is what happened. This is where we are today. And I agree with you. The personal things, it's cheap. It's a low blow. But again, it's creating a reaction, right? It's we need readership. We need traffic now on the websites. We need shares on the social media. So there's this whole side industry that exists, and it's who's going to get the news first, who's going to report it a certain way that it's going to garner more attention. It sucks, right? But it's also part of the deal.
In French, people were saying to me, si t'es pas capable, what was it again? It was si t'es pas capable de supporter la chaleur, sors de la cuisine.
Yeah.
So I mean, it comes with it.
And there's a lot of heat.
There is a lot of heat,
Yeah.
and it's difficult for reporters and in this age because of social media, because of the pressures that they have less time to do their job, and sometimes politicians and staffers we're frustrated because we believe that it was not done in a rigorous way, but in their head it was done in rigorous way, number one, and the other thing is they don't have all the time. They don't have 4 days to come up with something because a news cycle, you wake up in the morning, you listen to the radio.
It's 15 minutes.
And then you're at work and then the story changed. You come out of work and the story changed again. So the cycles are always coming. So these folks are under pressure all the time. The other thing that I understand, I got to understand at one point is that, no one is neutral in life. No one. So I don't expect the media to be neutral.
Yeah.
I expect the media to be fair.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And sometimes if I wasn't happy about an angle that a reporter was taking, it was only because I felt that it was a good thing to show the readers that there was another angle to it. But maybe his strategy was to write something in that sense. And the other thing is sometimes we were, as Backstage people, you're frustrated with an article, but the fact is that the person who wrote it sent it to his boss, his or her boss, and that person basically changed the title and said, you know what, we're not going to use your thing. So, they're getting pressure from everywhere. So the real debate here, I believe, is not how the media reacts to politicians or politicians react to media. As individuals, as citizens, we have to be aware and get our information from diverse sources.
Did you ever confront journalists? Did you ever call one up and say, "Look, man, what are you doing? What are you writing? Why?"
Yeah, often. Yeah, sometimes it went pretty bad, but sometimes it went well. Also, what I was trying to do was to call them when I felt that, in a factual way, that something was wrong, because when it's opinion based, they won't listen to you. If it was me, I wouldn't listen to somebody else. But if I say, you know what, that number is wrong, that thing is wrong, maybe we should change that because I saw this and here's the proof, they would take it. They're smart people. But, the tension is so high that sometimes when it's opinion based, it's not... That's why they call it spin, right?
Yeah.
Because Backstage people in press or what they do is that they spin their stuff. They basically take a situation and they call up reporters and they say, listen, this is the way we see it. So that if you ever talk about it on the radio, on TV, or you write about it, you'll know what we think about it. So you're trying to influence them so that it sways in your way.
Yeah, to write the story.
But they're not neutral. That's the thing. If you expect media to be neutral, you're in the wrong business. That's not the point. The thing, though, is that maybe compared to, I was talking earlier about the Democrats and the Republicans, right? Well, say the media in the US, the New York Times or Fox News or CNN, you know what they stand for, right? It's clear. Here, sometimes in Quebec, it's kind of fuzzy. It's kind of fuzzy because you don't know. We think that La Presse is more a federalist type of thing. We know the owner of Québécois is a separatist, so maybe Québécois is, but you don't have really proof of that. But when you're in France, when you read Libération, you know they're left, and when you read well, geez, I forgot the name, Figaro, you know they're on the right. So sometimes it's not that clear in the media who's where.
Well, then it's a good thing though in Quebec,
You
where
think
you would prefer them to
to be open and say
to have positions left, right, center.
well yeah. I actually went to a conference this morning, and one of the reporter was talking about this, and she was saying, she's from APTN, and she was saying that she felt that um, it wasn't fair to the audience that some media anchors on TV, or reporters, that they weren't saying what angle they're working on. So some people are more federalist, some people are more separatist, some people are more on identity politics, some people. But when it's not clear, it's kind of like there's a piece of truth that is missing.
Yeah.
So that's what she was saying, and I was listening to that, and I was telling myself that that was a pretty sound judgment about that.
But I find that the radio stations in Quebec are pretty well established in their positions.
You're right. Yeah.
More so than the
In
paper.
Quebec City also,
Quebec City, yeah.
it's pretty clear. Yeah. But on TV and it's sometimes it's
it's
hard
tough to gauge.
Yeah, it's tough to gauge. But is it because it's really tough to gauge, or is it because
That's how they're supposed to be?
But I'm tainted of 15 years of watching these people, in a microscopic way, and microscopic.
Microcosmic.
Cosmic. Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah. Maybe it's because of that.
You're
That's why I'm trying not to read newspapers now.
It must be tough, man. When you're out of the business, or out of the field, it's, and we're saying this before we went live. It's very difficult to adapt to what others consider reality, right? I mean, our reality.
Right.
I mean, and for me, I mean, there's so much time now, and we're working on a family business with my wife, and I just still feel that should I just be more involved? Should I go find something? I mean, what am I doing? I can't wake up at 8 and still be home at 10, kind of thing, right? I mean, I don't know if you feel that, but it's very difficult for me to adapt in this new reality.
It's like it's like any type of activity. I mean, you got to find a purpose.
Yeah.
From 2004 to 2018, my purpose was to wake up in the morning and try to work as hard as I can to convince people that.
Let's talk about that. Give me one day in your life. The press attaché. What time do you wake up?
Back in the day, God, I would wake up at it depends, 5:30, 6. Read the newspapers, drive to work, meeting on the phone to see what's happening in the media, and trying to define who's going to come out at what time, and to speak about subject in healthcare if there was an article or anything. Meeting with the premier maybe at 8:15, 8:30 to talk about question period, let's say. Then deciding if he was going to talk to the media or not while walking to the caucus. Sometimes he would stop, other times he wouldn't. When he would stop, we would talk about, what is he going to say, and work with, a small number of people on what's his angle, what's his response, what are the questions that could come out, what did the reporters write about this morning that could be asked while he's talking to them. And then we would go to caucus, he would go to question period, then I would go back to my office and try to look at the agenda and see, we have an announcement tomorrow, we have a speech on the tomorrow night, and then on Friday we have to go to, we have regional tour in Gaspésie, and on Saturday we're leaving for Paris, let's say. So
Just
I had to work
prepare.
on other stuff.
Yeah.
So I was trying to, when he was somewhere in a meeting or in the National Assembly, I was trying to advance different things with my team, and I mean, at any time, that's the thing. At any time, a reporter could be calling from anywhere in the world and ask us questions about different things. So we had to manage that thing also. So each and every day was different. That's what's fun about it.
Hmm.
It's not a 9 to 5 job where you do the same things every day. The things that you're doing every day are the things that are necessary to so that your day can move forward. So every day I'm gonna have to read the newspapers. It's like it's
Yeah,
a 2 inch
stack like
thing,
big like a
stacked.
dictionary.
So every day you do that, so that's repetitive. But
Yeah.
what's inside a newspaper is not repetitive.
Exactly.
So at one point you have to read all that stuff and try to make links on different things and understand. I have an example in mind. I guess when I was working for a minister called Jean-Marc Fournier in 2007, 2008, I remember that in the morning we were on different calls with the premier's office to see what was happening in the media. And at one point, I had read an article about the federal government who wanted to have adopt a bill on gun control. And when I went to the meeting, I told them, well, we're gonna get a question about by the media about what we're doing after what happened in English siege in Montreal.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and they were like, "Why are you saying that?" I'm like, "Oh, because in the National Post they wrote about that bill, and I know that reporters are looking at that. So you might get a question because if we're talking about gun control in Ottawa, maybe we might talk about it here in Quebec.
Yeah.
So what's happening with the law that we're supposed to table?" And what happened is that my boss came out at the time, Jean-Marc Fournier. He was in charge of the bills and adopting bills and stuff. And one of the questions he got was exactly that. So the federal government is thinking about that. What about Quebec with what happened in Montreal? So those are the type of links you're trying to make during the day to understand where to go and where can the questions come from,
Yeah.
and what exactly is your reaction to that, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. When you look back at all these years, I mean, you've been doing politics since 2004. Such a long track record. I mean, is there anything? Uh, I'm sure there's probably more than one. Like a situation that was so difficult and so challenging. Like, what's the moment or moments that are just imprinted in you? I mean, that you're always going to remember, and they're always going to be there.
Um, the terrorist attack in Quebec City and in the mosque,
Yeah.
because that was frustrating on so many levels.
Mhm.
But I remember it was a Sunday night in January. I was in Quebec City because I live there, watching TV. I was watching Tout le monde en parle. There was a commercial. I switched it to RDI. Then I saw shooting in Quebec City. So then I started listening to that. And when I heard, there's a sniper, he just left. The police are tracking him down. People are hurt, but I don't know how many. And I was like, okay, but when they said it was done in a mosque or a centre culturel, I was like, uh-oh, we have a problem. So I stood up, and actually the weird thing is that my phone was dead and it was charging. So when I opened my phone exploded with text messages, emails. I put my I put my suit on and I told my wife, I have to go. She told me why. I'm like, oh, we're gonna have a long night. Trust me. So then called up people in Quebec, called up the premier that was in Saguenay, and then all went to the office. The premier took a plane back to Quebec City. We did a press conference at like 1 a.m. with the mayor of Quebec. I slept, I think, at 4:15. And I woke up at 5:30 and I was back at work at 6:15 because we had to think about a lot of stuff. We had to think about, number one, the people mostly affected, which were the victims and the people in the hospital and their families. Then we had to reassure the people in Quebec City, number one, and then in Quebec that the situation was under control and they were secure, right? And then after that, we had to work with the different ministers and their ministries and hospitals and schools and try to see, do they need more funding, what's happening, do we have trauma situations, what's happening, and how do we manage the media in that, how do we use social media so that we can get our message out,
Yeah.
How can we use TV, how do we do this? So I mean, that night was a long night. The next day there was a press conference, I think, in Quebec, the in the mayor with the mayor of Quebec, at City Hall, and then the premier made a statement at his office that was really official. There was a ceremony in Montreal. There was a ceremony in Quebec. That was huge because it was emotionally charged for all sorts of reasons. And at the end of the day, I mean, CNN came to Quebec City to interview a lot of people concerning that, including Premier Couillard on that thing. So that was the I was doing communications. I mean, I was not the one that was actually attending to the needs of the people that are directly affected, but in a sense, I was contributing in my own capacity on trying to, to reassure people that felt that the world was upside down. So that was the biggest moment I've ever encountered. And it wasn't because of the job I was doing, it's because
The impact it
the
had.
impact it had on so many people. That was tough. Yeah.
And not directly linked to politics necessarily either.
It wasn't linked to politics. I mean, it wasn't linked to politics. My only focus was, how can we assure that people are okay, they feel secure, that cohesiveness, our society's cohesiveness is not broken, that the extremists on on both sides don't get all riled up. How can we make sure that that the city feels that on the, and that's later, but I mean on the international stage, how are people going to perceive Quebec? Like what type of message does that send? So, and that was the last thing I was thinking about. But still, those were all questions that we had to figure out in a short span, and was everything. I think that was one of the moments where Premier Couillard was really recognized by everyone as a statesman, because that's the type of person he is, and he rises above those situations. And it was fun. It was fun in a sense to have someone of this stature for to respond to those type of situations, because I at that time, with the people that were there, the best person to respond to that was him. And he did not expect that to happen, but I was glad that he was in office when that happened.
What about politically? Was there any, I don't want to say crisis, but anything huge happened politically that affected you?
In a positional stance?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, not really. Honestly, no, I was, because you know what? I wasn't. That's the weird thing. I was emotionally involved concerning my boss, and I took it personal, like we were mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
But for files, when you're at the premier's office, your job is to coordinate, the action of the government, knowing that you've named ministers, and they have their staff to make that happen, right? So you have to coordinate it. So my job when I was in comms, communications was, was not really. I think was not really to be present in political pressures or problems that we could have. I mean, my job was to find the way so that our message could come out. Period.
Yeah.
So I took a situation as a new mandate.
Yeah.
There's a problem with that minister, or that minister said that, or the opposition is asking for for démission. So what are we reacting? Okay, fine. What's the context? Where are we going? This is what we're suggesting. You go ahead and you do that. So I never
Like it
felt
almost
like
becomes mechanical at that point
it
after all
has to
those
be
years. Yeah.
mechanical. It has to be mechanical because, and you got to think about all the possibilities. That's the thing. That's a weird thing because in politics, when you're backstage, you're trying to figure out what is the worst thing that could happen.
It's
And
like this
then,
complicated math
yeah,
formula.
well, you're like looking at it's like a chess match,
Yeah.
and you're thinking, okay, I cannot think. No, no, maybe not two moves ahead. Maybe like I have to think about like six.
Yeah.
And then I got to figure out what's happening with the six, and for each one, I have to figure out what I have to do after that. So that's the way I was built.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I was thinking. So when something would happen, it wasn't a problem. It was a challenge.
Just because you have the experience as a communications guy, I have to ask you the whole issue right now at the federal government with SNC Lavalin. I personally think it's a non-issue, and I think that it's a huge communications fail. Uh, Put yourself in their shoes. I mean, how and it's obviously easy in retrospect to say what I would have done or how I would have reacted, but something like that happens. Like, how would you manage it?
Uh, it's tough. There's because there's a context to it. Number one, it's normal that a government or a premier's office or prime minister's office speaks with a minister to see if there's a solution that
Mm-hmm.
could be found when there's 9,000 jobs in the country that are affected.
Yeah.
It's rare that a minister comes out and says that she was pressured to do something. And at the same time, that person is telling you that nothing was illegal. It's tough because for the unity of the country, it's terrible because the people in the West feel, some of them feel like the prime minister was giving a pass to a Quebec company. And Quebecers feel that uh, it's, I mean, we have to save the company because the individuals that are there today have nothing to do with
Yeah.
that. So, from a communication standpoint, what Prime Minister Trudeau did was what he had to do, and it might have seemed not
On a
clear.
political level, I agree with you.
Yeah,
I think he did what everyone expects a prime minister to do in a situation like this.
yeah.
What I don't understand is the news comes out, and this is big, right? It's huge. So, and in the beginning, they're trying to hide information, they're trying to camouflage it, and then, they're saying, "Oh no, she's an important member of our cabinet." 24 hours later, she resigns. Like, there's all these things that just
You're
kept
right.
happening as a reaction. How do you not foresee these things? Just
Well,
come
you
out.
can't. Well, yeah, you can't foresee these things, but the thing is that there's sometimes you can't control every variable. That's the thing. I mean, if they're in their perspective, and in Prime Minister Trudeau's office, they're saying we did not put any type of undue pressure on her. We didn't. Whatever she says, we didn't.
No, but
But
what I'm saying is that instead of waiting for everything to happen and to react, I think for something like this, they should have just immediately said, "Look, this is what's happening. This is what we did. It's our duty to save these jobs." And I would turn it against the opposition. I mean, what do they want?
but the thing is that they're in government. They're not in the opposition. So there were some things that they could not talk about. I mean, if you ask a person from the prime minister's office today, do you believe that SNC Lavalin should have a DPA? Off the record, they're probably going to say definitely because we cannot lose these jobs. But the prime minister cannot say that because it would be perceived as interfering politically with something, and it's the decision of the attorney general. So that's why he can't say that. Then are you going the government? Are you going to force the Ministry of Justice or the Attorney General to? Are you not force? I mean, is the Attorney General of Canada right now? Is he going to tell his legislative branch to go with the DPA, although they said no? If you ask them personally, they would like to do it, but they can't answer that. And what Mrs. Wilson-Raybould did, and she had a good testimony, and she's a credible person. On the other hand, I did not feel that she was working with the team to find a solution.
Well, the perception now is that there's something mysterious happening in that caucus. There are groups, I think, that are either against them. Like you mentioned, there's probably Quebec bashing happening. The caucus is split east-west. There's something happening. It's my first reaction was that, okay, this is not normal that a cabinet minister comes out in such confrontation to the leader.
It can. You're right. It can happen, but it's pretty special. Yeah.
And she's not alone. Like, I mean, everything coming up now. I mean,
Yeah, but Minister Philpott. Well, Jane Philpott, who is an MP, she left the cabinet, but she's a good friend of Madame Wilson-Raybould. She's a really good friend. So
you would expect that, right? I mean, okay, there's friends, there's friendships, and there's and there's collaborations, and people have taken their side, but it just seems that there's so much more to come in this whole situation.
Well, I mean, the media is pretty happy about it.
Well, they're having a ball with it. The opposition is taking this all the way to the elections.
But you know what? What the sad thing about that story is that we've been hearing about the former attorney general, but nobody has answered the real question. Even the opposition parties. Will you protect 9,000 jobs in Canada?
But that's why I told you from the very beginning. Yeah. I would have turned it to the opposition and say, what would...
Yeah, they tried, but you know what? Sometimes you try to say A, and what comes out in the media is B. And sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes it's not their fault. But the public interest at that time was not about it was not about the real question, which is, protecting the company or not. It was more about political pressure. So even though Prime Minister Trudeau said, you know what, I did not have inappropriate pressure, and my focus is to find a solution for 9,000 jobs. Well, the focus was political pressure because it was leaked in the media, and then Wilson-Raybould said something. But the thing is, from a communication standpoint, sometimes you cannot leave a false version in your head be talked about in the media for like 2 weeks. So what happened is that former Minister Raybould came out with her truth, and then there was 2 or 3 weeks where we did not hear about the other side of the coin. And when Gerald Butts came in, some people said, you know what, he's pretty credible too. But why did he talk like 4 weeks or 3 weeks after Wilson-Raybould?
Was it that long?
Well, it was at least two weeks and a half or something. But it was long. They could have decided to put him on the stand earlier. They could have. That way we would have had, their version out earlier. But the time between former Minister Wilson-Raybould and Gerald Butts, the time that...
it allowed the media to have a ball.
Exactly. It allowed the media to think about different types of things that could happen or not. That's what happened. But when you hear Gerald Butts, his testimony, I can, from somebody that was backstage, I can understand what he says.
100%.
Completely. And probably a lot of people would have done the same thing. But does that constitute inappropriate pressure? I'm not too sure.
I don't think so either.
So some people in the caucus might say that she was not working as a team member.
The other thing that is shocking is that it's taking the caucus forever to make a decision. I mean, we saw people leaving our caucus or, being expelled from caucus or whatever. It just feels like in our case, within 24 to 48 hours, boom, there was a decision made. What is taking so long?
It's
tough. The problem is that you've waited so long now that if you decide to get them out of the caucus, you're going to be perceived as the bad guy now. I mean, there's so many things to juggle with.
So you got sometimes when you have bad choices, you got to evaluate which one will have less consequences.
Yeah, exactly.
So you kick them out, it's a bad sign. You keep them in, it might be poison for your group.
Oh yeah. And you're heading into an election. You don't know how that's going to play out.
So when you're thinking, what you're thinking is more, okay, so what is the less... what is the worst solution that I could come up with? So status quo seems pretty good. Honestly, you want to get that thing behind you. That's what you want to do.
It just doesn't want to unstick, though, eh?
True, you're right.
And of course, the opposition is doing their job.
If you make a decision on that and you come out and you say, I'm going to kick them out, you're basically giving the story a new life. Like, why would you do that? You rather like stay low and just talk about your budget, and at one point come up with a decision concerning SNC-Lavalin. And then when people talk to you about it, then you shift to the opposition. And you say, well, you NDP or you NP conservatives, what would you have done? Would you protect them or not? Are you for that or against? You know, that's your job.
We're gonna close it up. I just want to talk very quickly about what you're doing now, because you're on TV. You've been called up as a professional and a political analyst on one of Quebec's leading media. How was that whole experience for you now to be on that side?
I love it. I love it because for many years I've been advising a lot of people on what to say or trying to prepare them for different TV interviews and stuff. Um, I was basically talking without knowing. That's what I realized. Um, it's fun, number one, to speak my mind and not somebody else in the name of somebody else. Second thing is I understand the pressures of it now because it's tough. It's tough.
Is it difficult to that transition from being criticized to becoming a critic?
Not really, because I feel that I am fair, and I always back up what I say with some facts, and I believe that you cannot be wrong if your facts are right, right? So, and I try to leave the partisan game aside, so I call it as I see it. That's what I try to do.
I always wondered in those panels, and obviously there's people from different parties, whether they're former politicians or former staffers, such as yourself. Is the party at all involved? I mean, is there any directive, or do they tell you, "Oh, look, you can talk about that issue. This is where we stand,"
Oh.
or do they leave, or are you really free to just comment as you please?
Oh, I'm not. I mean, I talk on radio and on TV, and I'm not. I don't consider myself as a Parti libéral du Québec spokesperson on TV.
Okay.
I obviously have Quebec liberal values. That won't change. If I want to know something, I'll call them up, or I'll call my friends at some of my friends at the CAC, or I'll call somebody at the PQ, or at the federal level. I'll talk to MP, conservative MP, or the Prime Minister's office, just to get a sense. And I always tell them that I'm just asking questions to understand better your position, and I'll make my own judgment on that afterwards. So I don't bet. Obviously, sometimes when I say something good about someone, they text me and they say thanks, but but that was not the objective.
Yeah.
And I want to base my, I've been looking at how radio is done, and TV columnists. There's a lot of commentary. There's a lot of people who give their opinion, and that is fine. It was frustrating for me to sometimes to hear people talk and to kind of feel that their sense of judgment was altered because they were too liberal or too conservative or too caquiste or too piquiste. And that really, I thought for democracy, it was a terrible thing. So I try to be as neutral as possible. And I try to, on certain issues I'm more passionate about, like immigration or, in the international status of Quebec or relations with the federal government and other provinces. Obviously, if I see something that is not good, I'll be passionate about it and I'll say it. But I defended François Legault when he went to on TV, when he went to the States the first time. And one of my colleagues that actually is a partisan of the CAC was saying that his first move or his first trip to the U.S. Was not well organized. I defended Premier Legault on that one because I felt that he was completely wrong. See, so I can be I can be neutral in a sense.
Is it something that you want to pursue? Is it something that you want to do more of?
I like it, but I don't think it's my main objective.
Yeah,
I had never thought about being a reporter and going on the other side. That's not the. But I'm trying to be the person that can be as neutral as possible. And my motto is I'm gonna tell you everything I know and the way I think, but I'll back it up with facts and I'll let you make your own conclusion about it instead of doing the contrary.
Yeah. Are you going to stay close to the party now?
I'm trying to stay close. I don't want to be like others that after election defeat decided to just leave. That's not my objective. I'll see what I'll do later, job wise and career wise, and with the studies and the family. But uh, I'll probably stay involved. In what capacity, I don't know.
There's a leadership campaign coming up. What do you think the party has to focus on right now, based on everything that we've seen that went sour in the last election?
The number one thing I think is that the people the members have to decide what are the rules for the next leadership campaign.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it's got to get started. I'm a proponent of starting this thing as soon as possible. Not wait for like a year and a half or something. Others are saying that we should wait so that the party does the right diagnosis of what went wrong and all that stuff. I believe that the person who's going to be the next leader of the Quebec Liberal Party will have the mandate of going around different regions and try to talk to the people there, understand what happened, and then come up with an action plan so that it doesn't happen again. So the quicker we can get that thing started, the better it will be for the party. That's what I think.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just think that, I mean, we don't know who the candidates are going to be, but I'm just, I just fear that if ever, which is probably a small possibility, but if you have someone coming in from the outside, okay, and you do these elections the sooner, being 3 years or even 2 years as a leader, sorry, as a leader of the party outside the parliament, that's tough, man. It's very. I mean, you lived it with Premier Couillard. It's not easy to manage a team when you're not in the house. And of course, we're just assuming now that the next leader will come from the outside, which may not be the case. I mean, if someone is from within the party, then there's no problem. They're sitting in the house. But assuming that happens, it's a long time.
It is a long time, but there's an advantage to that because you're not exposed every day. So when Mr. Couillard got in and became the leader of the Quebec Liberal Party in March 2013, from March 2013 to December, we could decide when we wanted to be at the National Assembly. And while people were stuck doing other stuff, the government, we were just traveling and meeting people everywhere. So that was the best time because that's where we got the real feeling of how people felt in different regions concerning the economy, healthcare, education, and all that stuff. That's where those meetings were the best ones to understand what people were feeling. So it's not always negative. The other thing is that you were talking about the leader coming from outside the party. Well, Philippe Couillard was at the party, but he was outside the party at that time when he became when he got interested in the leadership campaign. Jean Charest was outside the party in '98. '98. I mean, well, he came when he came to the Quebec Liberal Party. So that's a scenario that could happen. There are some people in this caucus that I believe are very talented and that could do this job. But then again, I mean, you can't think I was born as a member of the Quebec Liberal Party politically, so I am not in the thinking that we only have to work towards a victory in the next election. I mean, it's better to understand completely what happened and to go see the people and understand the francophones, anglophones, the diversity, the regions, and build a political offer that will rally people. And to do that, this takes time. And we didn't have a lot of time with Monsieur Couillard because it was in March 2013. The election was in February 2014. Now we have time. So the more time we take to do it properly, the better results are going to come. So that's what the party has to do.
Do you think they'll be ready for 2022 or?
They have to. And the PQ also, and QS also, and the CAC also. Everybody's got to be ready for that. But it'll be interesting to see where, what is the DNA of those parties. What are they going to be?
Yeah.
You know, what does it mean exactly to be a federalist? What does it mean for a liberal? Individual liberties in 2019, what does it mean? For the CAC, a nationalist inside of Canada, what does that mean? Like, how do they contribute? Is the PQ coming back with separatism as the number one thing? And what does that mean for the people to sell it to the new generation?
Yeah.
And Quebec Solidaire, we talked about it earlier. What do they have to do to become a mainstream party while keeping their values to the left? That's interesting questions that will be answered in the next couple of years.
It's going to be interesting. Dude, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate you coming. I want to wish you luck with everything that you do. I follow you, obviously.
Thanks.
You're a brilliant guy, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It was really fun to speak with you. I'm doing that anytime, and thanks.